Chordplay, and this is part 2 of the Chords of Buckethead, and I did include Buckethead in an early Chordplay episode on this channel. I didn't have proper lighting, I didn't really have the flow of the Chordplay episodes together. I just kind of made the lesson, and when I go back and look at some of those early lessons, it's like, ooh, it's really dark, and I'm kind of, trying to figure out what I'm doing here, and I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing. But of course, Buckethead, his real name is Brian Carroll, and I've been following him since I was in college, and my roommate kind of floated me a copy of Praxis Transmutation, and my mind was blown. I was like, who is the guy with the bucket on his head? So there is a lot of mystery and mystique, behind Brian or Buckethead. And I know, as soon as I discovered, his music and I started to try to figure out who he was and I wanted to learn more, I discovered that you really can't find very much information. There's scattered, information. I did notice, he had some columns in old Guitar Player magazines, a series of lessons. And those were really interesting and written in a very bizarre way, written in his character, And I just continued. I tried to find photographs. I wanted to find out like his real identity. I do remember like in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was speculation that people thought he was Paul Gilbert. And Brian Carroll or Buckethead is not Paul Gilbert, but he did study with Paul. And he kind of has a link and a history with certain players, Sean Lane and Satriani. I know a lot of viewers out there are very observant, not only the things that I'm playing and breaking down during the lesson, but then also just the random stuff that I kind of have around me. And you may have noticed the addition of the Orange Dinosaur over here on my graveyard. That dinosaur actually came from Buckethead. I saw him in concert last year at the Vogue in Indy, and during his big toy binge or whatever where he hands toys out to the crowd, he handed me, that orange dinosaur. I felt like a kid, I was like, oh my gosh, Buckethead just gave me a toy dinosaur. And I've seen Buckethead twice. I also saw him about 15 years ago when he opened for the band Galactic. And that was the first time I ever saw him live. And I was on cloud nine. I thought, man, I finally got to see him. And when I saw him last year, it was just a solo tour and it was just him. And it was awesome. I remembered certain things from the first show 15 years before. And he did the toys, he did the nunchucks, he was breakdancing, he was doing all this random stuff. But he played great, great concert. So if you ever get a chance to see Buckethead, go see him. Tried to do a little bit of research before I did this lesson, and I couldn't really find the complete total anywhere, whether it's Wikipedia or on his website or wherever. But he's released over 10 albums this year, in 2020. Aside from a bunch of singles too. He's released a total of over 300 solo albums, whether they're, Buckethead Land or the Buckethead name, collaborations and some different things. He's very prolific, and most people don't even realize that he's just constantly putting new music out, which is so cool. With the opening, that was a real diamond in the rough from the album with the same name, and this is in a wacky tuning. I'm actually tuned down 3 whole steps. So it's standard tuning, but 3 whole steps lower. So you're gonna have, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, F, and B flat. So I'm using much heavier strings on the Les Paul to kind of accommodate for the tuning. And the lesson is gonna bounce around. We're gonna get into standard tuning, down a half step, and then there is another example in this lesson that's in this tuning. So we're going to be around, in random tunings, but I'll give you a heads up when we get there. But with this, he's basically finger picking through this. Got a little buzzy right there. There we go. So my guitar is definitely freaking out a little bit because it's not used to this tuning. But I did tune it this way and kind of stabilize the strings, kind of pulling them or whatever and retuning. So we're there, but, it may affect your guitar, the playability. You might have to adjust some things. But in the beginning right there, that's basically E minor. But he's playing E minor, you know. You can think of that shape, but we're way up here. There's your open E, you know, the E there on the 14th fret, G, the open B, and then an octave of that G on the 15th fret on the high E. And then he moves back to this. And that's basically going to be an E sus2. I guess you could think of that as E7 sus2 because we've got that D note right there. And then move all the way down here, and this is technically going to be C major 7 over B. And I know you might be thinking, well, what about that C note? But technically that open B is a half step lower than that C. So that open B string is actually the root of that chord, which is really weird. And then right there, just move back and you're basically playing a D octave with the open B string. He plays that, which is kind of implying B minor, and then he shifts that all the way back to where we started. And then you kind of repeat that pattern. Haunting guitar part. I love that song. All right, next up is the song Machete from Colma, and I love Colma. It's a great album, and it's something like this. See, we've got this series of, you know, interesting chords, and we've seen this a lot. It's A minor add 9. And he's really just spelling that out and lets it ring. It's kind of a slow-paced, you know, song too. And then you're going to flip that and move it back 2 frets, and that's going to function as an A minor sharp 5. And then move that sharp 5 back down to E, and you're basically strumming right there, and that's also A minor add 9. So we have 2 different versions of the same chord. You know, interesting. And you're going to do a lot of repeats of that. And then he starts strumming eventually, like when the guitar, you know, the lead kind of comes in with a melody. And that's this. That's basically, you know, A minor add 9, and then take that C off, and it just changes to A sus2, and then it's going to end with this F sharp 11, and then strum the A minor add 9 twice, and then there's a partial G right there. So there's your 4th fret on the G and the 3rd fret on the low E with the open D and open B, and that functions as G major. And then that F sharp 11 again. And that's really interesting too, after the arpeggiated part. Then you've got the strum part. Too. I love those chords. Right up next to the song Aunt Susie from the Cyborg Slunks album, and it's really cool. And this is the background guitar part. This is one of those songs where Buckethead's playing lead over this, you know, kind of arpeggiated chord part like this. E minor in the beginning with that open G, and then he moves all the way up here, and that's going to be a G major 7 sus2. Something like that. Just think of G major 7, but take that pinky off, that B note, and move it back to A right there. G major 7 sus2. Just basically grab this D octave with that open G string, and that's going to be a D sus4, and then move that down a whole step, and you're basically just playing a C5, and then you repeat that whole thing. Next up is the song Ghost, also from the album Colma, and we're down a half step for this example. And you're probably going to recognize these chords because we've talked about these several times in several other episodes on this channel. But Ghost is something like this. And there's like melodies and stuff over the top. But if you recognize that chord sequence, it's the interlude to Dust in the Wind from Kansas. It's also Close My Eyes Forever from Lita Ford. And we've talked about both those songs on this channel. And here we are hitting those chords again. But Buckethead is literally kind of sustaining those chords and letting the dissonance ring. And it's creating that kind of unsettling, spooky sound. And I love that sound for sure. It's like the theme for a graveyard in the middle of the night or something. It just sounds scary. Okay, next up is the song Angel Monster from Electric Tears, another good mellow, Buckethead album, and it's something like this. Too. I like the beginning with those two chords just kind of ringing back and forth. So right there, that's basically going to be an A7 sus2, and then you're going to basically raise that fifth, and you've got A7 sus2 sharp 5. So very odd chord choices there. That really lends that kind of haunting, sound for sure. And then he flips what he's doing, and he basically reverts back to this. And that's going to be an A minor 9 sharp 5, because he's going to raise that fifth right here. And also the picking's a little weird because he goes straight up, and then you want to raise that fifth, and you're going to pick the B and then the G, like that. The next example comes from the song 4, which is from Pike number 65, and just a heads up on Buckethead's Pike series. But his Pike series is this ongoing series of albums, and they're not quite full-length album, as far as the running time, but they're definitely longer than an EP, so it's kind of in between an EP and a full-length album. But 4 is something like this. just basically, you know, holding down these two notes, that G sharp and C sharp on the G and the B string, and then the bass note is what's changing. And I'm a big fan of, you know, chord progressions and guitar parts like that, where certain notes lock in, and then maybe the bass notes or, you know, lower notes in the chord kind of move around, and you hear this change, you know, between the chords. Really interesting. So that's going to function as C sharp 5 right there. And then that's going to move back to a B, and that's going to become B6 sus, what, a B6 sus 2. And then right here, that's going to be A major 7. And then back to that B6 sus 2. So it's interesting what happens to this when you change those lowest notes, the bass notes. Last example comes from the song Broken Mirror, and this is also from A Real Diamond in the Rough, and I'm basically tuned down 3 whole steps like I was at the beginning of this lesson. And it's something like this. Guitar's a little buzzy from this weird tuning, especially on that chord. So watch out for some of these weird tunings. But the guitar part itself has some really interesting chords. We're kind of kicking it off with this. So that's kind of E minor sharp 5 technically. And then basically move that up a whole step, and then you're going to have E minor 11 right there. So even in this dropped tuning, you can still kind of hear that sinister sound of those chords. So he repeats that, you know, several times, and then he opens the song up with this. So right there, that's really unusual. That's going to be an E minor. B sus 4. And that's really unusual because you're holding down that B note on the G string, and then eventually you open it up. Something like that. And it's kind of hard to hear, you know, with the drop tuning like that. But there is kind of a little melody that's forming with those chords. And then you're going to move to this. And that's basically just C major 7 with that open B string in there. That's going to wrap this look at part 2 of the Chords of Buckethead. I'm definitely a fan. You know, I've been following him for a very long time, since I was in college. You know, I've seen him live a couple times in concert. You know, I've got a bunch of his, you know, CDs. I've got some vinyl, and obviously an Orange Dinosaur too. But you know, very interesting, unusual, and kind of an unexpected, you know, guitar hero, because I really do admire Buckethead, and I think he's very unusual and unique and interesting. You never really know what he's going to do or what he's going to play, and that makes it exciting, you know, where you have this kind of heightened, you know, expectation, like, what's he going to do? You know, is he going to shred guitar? Is he going to whip out some nunchucks or something, throw out some toys, or is he going to start doing, you know, something else that's random? Anyway, leave some feedback and some comments. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content material. Thank you.